Howdy, it's me, Dumpy Harasser. And today I wanted to talk to you guys about what this channel is going to be about and why I'm talking about what I'm talking about. And the reasons behind what I'm saying, what I'm doing, and all this kind of stuff. So to kind of start things off, I guess, I will start off by saying I was born in Canada. Still live here, still raised here, all that kind of stuff. Grew up in a good neighborhood. My family's awesome, all that kind of stuff. I think I was around 12 years old when I went to my mom's place at the time, and I noticed my stepdad was playing a video game, and I was like, okay, that looks weird. I was like, I've never seen this game before. I've never heard about it. And I was like, what even is this, right? So I asked him, and he goes, yeah, it's WoW. And I'm like, what's WoW? That makes no sense to me. Because I'm like, WoW what? What's WoW? And he goes, World of Warcraft. And I'm like, oh. And he kind of looks at me and he goes, it's not for you. Just go. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I leave the room. But what I'm trying to say here is my curiosity peaked at this point because he told me it's not for me. And that's when I was like, okay, I don't think so. So I started hanging around more often. I started walking down the hallways and peering into his room and all this kind of stuff. And then I started talking to him when he'd come outside, and I'd be like, hey, how's it going in there? And he'd tell me things here and there about, oh, I just did a couple quests. I leveled up. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. What does that mean? And I just kind of ask questions and, try to fill up my brain with these questions and these answers that I could kind of piece together to make my own game. So back then, I was 12, 13 years old. My understanding of the game was you're playing as somebody that isn't yourself, but you're acting as if it is yourself. So you're doing all these things as if it's yourself. And that's what intrigued me the most. So I kept watching and I kept, watching. And eventually he let me sit in with him. And that was like my crown jewel moment, right? That was like the moment that I was like, oh my gosh, I can finally watch this. So I go in, I sit on the bed next to his desk, and I'm watching. And I see him killing just random packs of mobs in Draenor. Or Outland, I should say, my bad. He's killing random packs of mobs in Outland, and I'm like, what are those things? And he goes, they're demons. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And he goes, do you want to try? And I'm like, I don't want to break it, because I don't know what's going on, and I don't want to intrude, but my curiosity really pushed me forward, and I was like, yeah, I'll try it. He had a Blood Elf Paladin, and at the time, Paladins were pretty good at surviving, so I don't think he was too mad that I, got on and did a couple things, because with the press of a button, I could be fine. So I started killing a mob, and he was telling me which buttons to press and what to do and all that kind of stuff, and I really felt something with this game, right? So over time of watching Burning Crusade and, formulating this storyline in my head from watching him play. And then finally at the end, I watched him raid Black Temple. And I saw Illidan. And I was like, this guy is awesome. This guy is crazy. This guy is cool. And I didn't think they could top that. So I was like, okay, whatever. And then there came a time when my stepdad was talking to one of his buddies in his guild. And they were talking about something called the Lich King. I was like, what's this? And I kind of intrigued or imposed on the conversation. I was like, what is that? And he goes, it's the next expansion. And I'm like, what's an expansion? I don't get it. So he goes, it's a little addition to the game where they add new features, new zones and stuff like that. And for me, I wasn't even playing the game, but I was stoked. I was so excited. I was like, new content. I get to look at new stuff. I get to, not see the same stuff over and over again, right? And that's super exciting for me. I was so pumped. So then we get the trailer for the Lich King. And at this point, I had, briefly watched my stepdad play Warcraft 3 off and on. That's what introduced him to WoW, was Warcraft 3. So I, watched him here and there play that. And then I saw the cinematic for Wrath of the Lich King. And this was just blew my mind. So the first thing I remembered from that trailer that I still remember to this day was sitting there with my stepdad. We watched it together. I still remember sitting there, looking at him dead in the face and saying, I want to ride that dragon. I want to ride that dragon. That's what I want to do. It was Sindragosa, and I was like, I want one of those dragons. And he said, good luck doing that. That was the biggest push for me to want this game was that I saw the Lich King and I'm like, this guy is badass. And I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I didn't know the story and I didn't know anything like that. I didn't know the lore. I didn't know Warcraft 3 very much, barely at all. So I saw the Lich King and I was like, this guy's awesome. He's just out there, kicking ass and all that kind of stuff. I want to be that. And then I saw the Death Knight hero class and I was super pumped. And so that's the first time I asked my stepdad if I could make a character on his account. He said no. Obviously, that was the answer, because at that time, they were prepping for the raid. And there was a whole bunch of different raids coming out at that time. And I was like, okay, well, whatever. It's fine. I'll just leave it at that. And, he was getting ready to, keep going up to the next level cap and all that stuff. So I was like, okay, that's cool. So the time comes and they finish all the raids and I'm watching them do, Lich King, ICC, and I'm like, oh my gosh. This is crazy. So from watching Illidan and Black Temple to where they went to now, right? So from here to here, there was such a big jump in what I saw in terms of aesthetics, in terms of fantasy, because I wasn't playing the game. I was watching and analyzing the story, and I was watching the players and the characters and the looks of the characters and all that kind of stuff, right? So I got to see this huge jump. And I got to see the huge content experience. I wasn't playing it, mind you, but I was watching it. And I'd sit there every raid night and I'd watch. I'd watch. There was some nights on weekends where I would stay up way past my bedtime just to watch him raid. And that's what drove me to keep wanting to play this game. There was something inside of me that said, you need this game. This game is going to be what you want to do. This game is going to be amazing. And I was like, okay, sweet. So, and, I'm really pumped up and I'm really excited. And they finished ICC. And, I forget how much long later, Cataclysm was announced. And this is when my whole world flips upside down. So what happened was I was turning, I think, around 15, 16 years old. And I was still pretty young. I was probably 15, actually, closer to 15, 14. I was still pretty young. And so I go to my stepdad. I'm like, hey, look, I know you don't want me playing on your account, but the raids are done. You're max level. Can I please make a level 1? Just let me try it. And he goes, let me ask your mother. So he goes out of the room and he goes and talks to my mom, and I hear them bickering a bit, but he comes back and he says, okay, you can try it. So I sit down in that chair, and the first thing I feel is just pride. As somebody who's loved a franchise but never even played it, never even touched it, I pressed 3 or 4 buttons, killing that mob in Outland, and that was it. That was my only experience with the game. Now to making my own character. So I made a troll, and I made a troll hunter, because I thought trolls looked cool. I liked their whole voodoo theme. It was kind of cool to me. So I made a troll hunter, and I did the starting zone, and I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm getting the hang of this, right? And then I get pulled off the computer because I had a half an hour time limit. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So every day at the same time, I reserved that computer for half an hour until they bumped it up to an hour, and 2 hours, 2 hours and a half. I kept bargaining with my stepdad to get more and more time on the computer. Eventually, the trailer for Cataclysm released, and I was beyond excited. I saw this big dragon. I saw this awesome, tearing the world, all this kind of stuff. And I was like, man, this is going to be sick. And then I saw the Goblins of the Worgen. At that time, I was still pretty young, and I was like, yo, Worgen, those are sick. Like, werewolves, those are awesome. And I saw goblins, and I'm like, those guys look pretty cool. And I'm like, I was excited. And, I didn't really know what to think of it. And I still had my character on my stepdad's account. I was still leveling him up. I wasn't max level yet. And then he comes to me and he says, I'm not going to play WoW anymore. I'm canceling my subscription. And for me, I was hurt and I was shocked because I didn't know this game ran off a subscription. I thought it was just like you buy the game, you buy the expansion, you keep playing. So I was like, what what do you mean subscription? He's like, you have to pay a certain amount a month to keep playing. And right now we just don't have the money. I'm like, okay. So I kind of sat with it for a while, and I felt really bad because I didn't have this part of my life that I dedicated at least 2.5 hours to every day. So, I'd come home from school and I'd be like, what do I do? Nothing. So what I started to do was I started to watch YouTube videos. I started to read lore. I started to get the books. I started to, get into the lore heavily. And up until that point, it was around the end of Cataclysm, right? And it was very hard for me to process everything that was happening because I wasn't playing the game, but it felt like I was playing the game. I was watching the game. I was learning. I was growing. I was becoming a part of the franchise that I wanted to be a part of, right? So I would watch my stepdad play until he canceled his subscription and it finally ran out. So the month ran out. Now that was it. It was done. And then I remember I tried to log on the day after, and I said, "Why can't I play my character?" He's like, "It's not going to work that way. It's done now." And I was really upset because up until that point, I had assumed I would still be able to play my character because it wasn't his character. I thought his subscription was for his character, and I'm like, since I never paid for a subscription, I don't need one for my character. So I was really bummed out. And, it took a while of me asking my mom, the poor soul, bless her heart. I was asking her daily if I can get WoW. Can I get it? Can I get it? Can I get it? Can I get it? Please, 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 please. No. Every time, no. And, it got to a point where I was really nagging her, and I was like, hey, can I get WoW? Why not? I was actually starting to ask questions, and I think I showed, my thing was I tried to show her my interest. So literally all I asked for Christmas was WoW stuff. I got the Trivial Pursuit WoW game that I still play now. I got, some little trinkets here and there. I got a big WoW book. I got a guide to World of Warcraft, all that kind of stuff. I was preparing myself mentally for this big, expansive world that I had spent so much time, not even in, but learning about because I wasn't able to play it. So time goes along and it's about, end of Cataclysm. And I get a call from my mom. And I hear her downstairs and I'm like, okay, I'm coming. So I come downstairs and she whips out the box for Cataclysm. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, does my stepdad want to play again? And she goes, no, you do. And I'm like, oh, wait, what? And, my little brain of my teenage brain was going in circles really crazy. And I was like, what do you mean? How do I pay for the subscription? How do I do this? How do I do that? And my mom was just like, I got you covered. Enjoy your game. And that's when it started for me. My definitive start date was in Cataclysm, end of Cataclysm. So I think it was precisely about 2 or 3 weeks after I got Cataclysm, they announced Mists. And, I was like, pandas? At this point I had read the lore. I knew about Chen Stormstout. I knew about his story with Vol'jin because I had read their story. I knew about him and Vol'jin, and that's why I liked Vol'jin so much was from reading that story. So a part of me was like, okay, maybe they're going to talk about Vol'jin a bit more, maybe get him more involved. And I was like, okay. So now I was even more pumped to play the game. So I was playing the game constantly. I was playing it all the time. And at this point, I started to realize I'm actually doing good in school. And I was like, why am I doing well in school if I'm barely my mind isn't even focusing on it? And I realized I'm doing so well in school because my brain is always ticking and I'm always trying to prove myself. So when it came to school, my mom said to keep my subscription, I had to have good grades. I had to average over a B. And I was like, okay, that's kind of difficult. I think I can manage. So every time I walked into school, that same mindset and that same drive I had for WoW, I'd put into my schoolwork. And when I'd come home, it's WoW again. So school was my, zone. School was me working. So I started playing Mists, and I got really into it. Still playing. I made another Troll Hunter. I was playing my Troll Hunter, and I was really, really intrigued with the storyline with Garrosh. And the reason I was so intrigued with Garrosh was because I watched his whole story and I read about it and I read books and all this stuff. And I read about it. I'm like, man, something just seems off. I don't think he's that bad, And then, now you go on YouTube and you see millions and thousands of videos of why Garrosh did nothing wrong. I'm not going to dwell too much on that. That's a topic for me to talk about another day. But at that time, even at that young age, I was probably around 15, 16 years old. I still didn't see nothing wrong with him. I was like, what is he? He's doing what he knows. He doesn't know anything different, And that's where a lot of my confusion began. But at the same time, I was enjoying the game. It was still my first time playing the game, so a lot of the balancing issues and a lot of the game-changing things, like Dungeon Finder and all this stuff, it didn't affect me directly because this was my first time playing the game. So I'd hear people complain about Dungeon Finder and all this stuff, and I'd be like, okay. Like, I saw my stepdad play without it. I knew it wasn't there to begin with, but at the same time, it was there when I played it. So that's all I knew, right? I couldn't speak for not knowing that. So then Draenor rolls around. For me, Draenor was the expansion that captured my love for the Horde in the weirdest way possible. I remember watching the cinematic, and when I saw Garrosh go to Grom, his father, and, tell him everything, and, they confronted Gul'dan and Manoroth and all that shit, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And then the moment Grom raised his axe and said, we will never be slaves, that's the moment that I was like, yep, orcs are cool. Orcs are awesome. Orcs are awesome. There's no other word to describe it for me. It's the whole values. And I know people are going to be like, well, what happened after that speech? I'm like, yeah, I know. And for me, it was an interesting storyline to follow. It might not have succeeded as well as they wanted it to. Definitely didn't. But at the same time, it was an interesting way to go. And it was a very emotional journey for a lot of people who had played that game for so long to see those characters again. For me, seeing Grom, somebody I never saw before, or that somebody I never knew I saw before. I might have seen him here and there, but I didn't know I saw him. Seeing Grom was amazing for me because I was like, I hear about him. He's Garrosh's father and all this kind of stuff, and I'm like, this is gonna be crazy. And then when I found out the guy in the cinematic was Grom, I was sold. Anyways, so Draenor is wrapping up, and Draenor's wrapping up, and I forgot to mention this in Mists. When they made Vol'jin war chief, happiest guy in the world. I love trolls. I love Vol'jin. I think that was the best decision they could have made. I'm saying this because we all know what happened in Legion. Pretty much first mission, Vol'jin dies. And little me, I was 16, 17 now. So me now being like that age, I got fed up. And I was like, I don't want to play this if Vol'jin's not in here. I'm done. And I was like, I'm not playing Legion. They killed off Vol'jin. I don't want to play. So I didn't play till like halfway through Legion. I didn't feel the need to. I didn't want to. They killed off my race's leader. I didn't want to. And what was the kick in the pants to me was making Sylvanas war chief after Vol'jin. Because I was like, really? Sylvanas? And I was like, okay, whatever, man. That's, I'll deal with it. What got me to come back to the game was the artifact weapons, and I thought they looked cool. And that was about it. Like, that was it. And I saw that hunters could have an extra pet. I lost my mind. I was like, oh, I'm in. And I saw you could have Hattie on the side, and I was like, okay, I'm sold. I'm coming back. So I came back midway through Legion. What struck me as difficult wasn't the content itself. It was the overwhelming amount of content. At this time, I'm still in high school, and I'm still trying to finish up my high school stuff. But at the same time, I have to come home, I have to do my dailies. I have to do my world quests, all this different stuff. And I'm like, this is so much, all to just keep on top of it. I'm not even trying to go ahead. I'm just trying to stay on top. I'm not even trying to go ahead of people. I'm just trying to stay relevant enough, right? So that's what really deterred me from WoW in the first place, was the amount of time dedication I needed for this game to capture my interest and make me want to play. The reason I liked the expansions before was it was so linear, and it was, this is your storyline. You do it from here. You have quests on the side, but this is your storyline. You know, Draenor started to introduce the whole world stuff, and I was cool with it because it wasn't forced. It wasn't like you have to do this. And that's because you could get to level, what was it, 100 or 110? I think it was 100. You could get to 100 without needing to do all that stuff. It was better if you did, but you didn't have to. And that's why I was like, okay. Because at that time I was still pretty young, and I just wanted to follow a storyline that I could keep in my head. So that's what deterred me from Legion, was the amount of time due to what else I was doing in my life. You know, if I had the time, of course I would have kept playing and I would have put the time into it. But at the same time, once I had the time, it was the summer came around and I had the time to play, and it was so tedious. I didn't want to collect all the artifact power. It was just so repetitive. And I hear all these people talking about how they're making the demographic for younger audiences. They're making it easier. They're making it this. They're making it that. How are they making it for people like me and younger audiences if it's even boring for us? That's what I don't understand. So the main topic of this video that I wanted to kind of touch upon was what I see from a younger demographic as the people that, so a lot of the YouTubers say that they're targeting people my age now, so the younger demographic. I wanted to speak as a member of that demographic and kind of push my ideas forward and kind of say how I felt. So I understand that they're trying to make the game easier, and they are, and it's a bad thing and a good thing. For me, I think it's a bad thing because the way they're doing it is wrong. You want to make the game easier, there's different ways you can attack it. I think by making the game boring and by giving you a whole checklist of things you have to do just to stay relevant is not the way to do it. If you're trying to target people that are in their 20s or young audiences, that's not the way to go. You know, if you're trying to baby us through the game, you're trying to make it easier for new players, don't make it boring. That's not the way to go. In my opinion, the way you should do it is you should have these big events here and there, you know, that give you XP, that give you gear, but are relevant to the story. Not just little world quests here and there that don't make any sense and don't mean anything. I think what Legion had that was pretty cool, actually, was the invasions. You know, at the same time, there were a lot of them and pretty frequent, and it gave you good stuff, but you had to be there to get it. And that was the one thing. I think that if there was quests here and there that helped determine things and helped push the story forward and move you in a certain direction, it would help. So at that time, I'm sitting in my chair and I'm thinking, and I'm like, I have all these ideas going through my head. And especially the storyline, I'm thinking about things about the story because I grew up watching the story and I knew about Illidan. I thought the demon hunters were cool and all. But I didn't understand it. And that's what was hard for me because as a kid who grew up with the game and wasn't adapted to the game, that's what I think the big difference here is, growing up with the game and being adapted to it. The people who adapted to it were the adults because they weren't young when they seen it, so they didn't grow with it. For a kid growing up with it, having so many story changes here and there sucks because you're lost. And, you know, that really pushes my perspective away from liking the game. So I'm starting to ramble now, so I'll bring it to BFA. So BFA was a tough one for me because I didn't know if I wanted to play or not at this time, because I was so tired of this boring, repetitive world quest dailies, all this kind of stuff. I didn't know what I wanted from the game at this point. It had been a long time, or at least since Mists, since they added a race. And, it's a long time. And I started to think to myself, they won't add a new race because they're not going anywhere different. They're not doing anything. And then when I watched the trailer, they announced the allied races. That's what hooked me. I was like, okay. And when I saw the Mag'har orcs, I was sold. I was sold because I wanted to be like Grom. I wanted to be like Garrosh, all this kind of stuff. So I was like, yeah, I'm sold. So I started playing BFA. And to this day, I have not unlocked a single allied race. And you can call me a casual all you want, but I just started playing again recently. I just started playing quite literally a week ago, and I'll tell you what happened and why I haven't unlocked an allied race yet. I was playing BFA, and I got to a point in my life. I was so fed up with the game. I didn't want to do it anymore. I hated where the story was going. I hated this whole idea that Sylvanas and whatever and all. I didn't like it. And it got to a point where I was so angry, I deleted my characters and I uninstalled the game. I said, I'm done. I'm never coming back. And, it's been a long time. And last week, I decided to give the game another shot. I came back and, starting from fresh again is difficult. Or it's not difficult because of heirlooms and all that kind of stuff. It's not difficult, but it's hard. What I mean by difficult is it's hard to see all of this story progression be pushed in a direction nobody agrees with. And you can say that I don't know what I'm talking about because I'm so young. I don't know the story, all this kind of stuff. But when I saw the trailer for Shadowlands and I saw Bolvar get his ass kicked, how do you think I felt? To put that into perspective, I grew up playing WoW, or watching WoW, I should say, when the Lich King was around. And it took 40-something people to beat the Lich King. 40 players, an NPC, and a whole bunch of other stuff to beat the Lich King. And then, you grow up with this idea in your head that the Lich King is unbeatable and nobody can beat him. And all the way through BFA, I hated Sylvanas. Hated her. Not because of what she did to the Alliance. That really doesn't bother me. It's what she did to the Horde. So the whole thing with Sourfang, all that kind of stuff, really ticked me off. Like, it really grinded my gears. So seeing her never lose, never lose, really hurt. But not too long ago, I was questing in, I think it was Hillsbrad, and I was playing on the Horde side of the Gilneas questline, and there was a section where Sylvanas seemingly died because Lord Godfrey and Walden, all those guys, they teamed up and poisoned her and killed her. And you had Valkyrie around you. And at that time, one of the Valkyrie said it was part of the bargain. And then I was like, hey, wait a minute. What bargain? And then this whole thing with Sylvanas and this jailer of death making a deal, I was like, that quest line was from Cataclysm. Like, did they have this plan since Cataclysm? That's what blew my mind. And that's what kind of grabbed my interest again in BFA, was realizing it's always tied in. No matter how much you want to fault Blizzard, it's pretty much always tied in somehow. So just from that one quest and them saying the bargain and all that really got my brain working and saying, how much do they have in the back door that we don't know about? And that's what really grabbed my attention, because with WoW, there's so many possibilities for good storylines, even bad storylines, good events, bad events, classes, races, everything. It's an expansive world. And for me, coming into it at such a young age and being exposed to it all my life, basically, or at least the moments in my life that were most important to me, so my teenage years and a little bit before that, I was involved with something. So now I'm going to address the issues with, what people think is good because they baby them versus, the whole demographic issue. So I don't want to speak for everybody that's my age that plays the game, because obviously I can't. Or even those around my age that are typically involved in this conversation. It's hard to be, put in that kind of situation, because you're instantly looked down upon, right? And you constantly have to prove yourself to everybody. And it feels like there's this stepping stone in WoW nowadays where you have to be at it was always like this, but I feel for people my age, there's a stepping stone where if you want to prove yourself, you have to do certain things. You have to accomplish certain things in the game, or you have to know certain things. So for me, joining guilds was not easy. I'm not in a guild right now, and it's hard because I don't like disclosing that I'm 18, because immediately immaturity comes into play. I'm not knowledgeable about the game. I don't take it seriously comes into play. And that's what's hard, because people look at retail and they're like, okay, babied, easy. They look at classic, they're like, okay, taking it back, fan favor, doing all this stuff that really makes sense. For me to judge somebody for liking classic is wrong, because I never even watched it. My stepdad didn't play classic. I don't know about it. So I can't judge classic. I've played WoW classic. I think it's pretty cool. Don't get me wrong. I think it's cool. I think the whole idea of it's not holding your hand is nice. I feel like it's a nice change of pace, which brings me to my next point of, just because I'm part of that younger demographic doesn't mean I like being babied, So I grew up watching my stepdad having to go through the quest log, look at the map, talk to his buddies, all that kind of stuff to find where the quest objective was. And when I started playing, I had it handed to me. So there was a part of me that was confused, right? But I never liked having it handed to me because it felt unrewarding. So for my stepdad, who, still had little hints here and there about quests and read quest text sometimes, and he was learning. And I was right there with him. I just wasn't playing. I was just right there with him. Learning about all this different stuff was difficult because it was so much, but at the end of the day, when you learned it and you got it in your head, it felt good. You felt like you did something. And that's what makes me feel like an accomplished player. And it doesn't matter how old you are, how young you are, you're going to get the same satisfaction based on that fact every time. It all depends on the work you put into it, the time you put into it, the quality of the game you're playing that you're putting the work into, and as well as the surrounding factors. So what I mean by surrounding factors is the rewards. So mounts, all that kind of stuff, achievements and titles, all that kind of stuff. So for me, coming into this game at such a young age and being exposed to this negativity constantly. No, I can't find a YouTube video that speaks about retail positively. And I can see why. I'm not saying I agree with everything they're saying. I agree with most things, don't get me wrong. But for me, since I started so late playing WoW, I have an attachment to the story because I grew up with the story. And my main thing that I don't like about WoW right now is the story. So the reason I'm so attached, the reason I'm so needy of this story to get better is because I experienced it. And I think that's what people don't understand is that I might have not played the game. I might have not, interacted with others. I never quested that much in Burning Crusade. I killed 4 mobs. That's it. So for me to say that I played it isn't fair and it's not right, but I watched it and I learned about the game and I got involved in it in other ways. And that's what people don't understand about kids in my generation, because I know I'm not the only one like this. I can guarantee that there's other kids exactly in my situation right now who had parents playing it, or brothers or sisters, cousins, whatever, that got them into it. And it's that little bit of curiosity in the brain that piqued all of our interests. And whether you ran with it and are all the way up until BFA now, or you stopped in Legion, you stopped in Mists, you stopped in Cato, whatever. For me, I don't think I can stop playing WoW. Not because I'm addicted, because I can not play if I choose to. What I mean by stop playing is I don't think I can stop following the progression. So even if there's a time 10 years from now I'm not playing WoW anymore, I'll still be watching the trailers. I'll still be keeping up with the storyline because I'm that involved in it, because I have that much of a connection to it. I feel as though it's very much undervalued, the time that people have spent with the game rather than playing the game. So, like I said before, I might not have played it very much, but I was with it for a long time. For more than half of my life, I was with the game. And throughout those years, it was the most impactful years of my life, right? So, the thing that I want to get across right now, the reason that I'm making this video, is to say that age in an MMO does not determine superiority, does not determine knowledge, and does not determine skill. Because there are so many factors that go into a game that you can approach it in many different ways and end up with the same outcome as somebody else. I may never be at the level of Asmongold, and I probably will never be there. I may never get to the same level as Swifty in PvP, and I probably won't. But there's always something that drives you to play this game, whether it's the skill, whether it's the knowledge, whether it's the storyline. There's always something driving you to play this game. And that doesn't change with age. It stays the same with age. Because for me, growing up, it was the knowledge piece. It was watching and learning. And then skill came second. And then everything else, the storyline fell into place when I figured everything out. I just want to thank you guys for watching this video, and like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed. If you didn't enjoy, leave a dislike and leave a comment why you didn't like it. Let's have a little discussion. Let's get it going. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.